Nebraska football has a new running back, and for 2024, we discuss next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down or end. The sport stops like we want it to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for you every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started.
All right, welcome in. We're a day late, I guess, from our normal schedule on this one. Connor Happer and Mitch Sherman with you on the Locked On Nebraska podcast. I wanted to hold off because there was some recruiting news yesterday, as Mitch mentioned. We'll also talk about the conclusion of the College World Series during this show as well, and plenty more coming at you. But like you said in the cold open, Mitch, Huskers picked up a running back out of a prep school. It was originally, going to reclassify to 2025 and then back down to 2024 now, as they just kind of plucked him out of the prep school in Mekhi Nelson. Yeah, it's very confusing, but that's what it's going to be. And he'll join the roster, for all intents and purposes right now. Mekhi Nelson, he's in the room. It's a big jumble in there. And I don't know, like, let's just start there. As this is a little off script, I guess, but as you look at that running back group with the addition of Nelson, what do you like? What even stands out to you in that room at the moment?
A lot of uncertainty, a lot of legs, a lot of bodies, and not a ton of definition about who's going to be carrying the ball. I mean, it could be like literally six guys or seven, even. If I'm counting right. I don't know. We'll count it up in the third segment when we talk more about this, but it's just a jumble that EJ Barthel has in front of him. And EJ Barthel was the link here, who found, much like Quentin Ives a year ago, who had a past history with this running back, and Mekhi Nelson, who was a Pennsylvania kid, and then he went to prep school in Connecticut and was gonna delay his college entry by a year to 2025, and then he went to a camp back east in May and put up some good verified numbers, which Matt Rule and Barthel and all of those coaches are really big into examining. And voila, he's got a Nebraska offer for 2024. So comes out to Lincoln, visits in June, and just like that, he's on the team. Somebody asked me on social media on Monday if it's a little bit late for these guys to be signing and continuing to add, and I'm like, well, this is the fourth guy in June that Nebraska's added. So
there's no such thing late or early anymore. I think it's just kind of what it is all the time, everywhere.
There might be more. They hosted a corner, Sire Wright from USC, who's a portal guy, more of a traditional method of adding players than what we've seen with Jalen Gramstad and John Hull, the kicker out of Lincoln Southwest, and now with Mekhi Nelson, also David Hufkin, the big German offensive lineman that we've been talking about for seemingly the last month. He was on campus over the past week too, and tweeted out his commitment. So lots happening as this roster gets nailed down for the 2024 season.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say there's still kind of a long way to go as far as building the class, obviously, for 2025, which I know this conversation could be a little bit rattling sometimes because we're bouncing around everywhere because they're adding players from various different places. But
that's June.
Like you said, there's so much, like there's probably still more to go in 2024. And we've heard from Rule over the last week now. They're going to add guys from every corner of the earth if they can find them, because as of right now, I mean, he's talked extensively about what he has in terms of roster limits, and his athletic director has been very willing to give him the leeway to allow him to have as many players on the roster as he needs. So they're going to add. And they're going to get them in the program and kind of develop and they give themselves more shots, I guess, to get good players. But it unorthodox ways of adding players, but maybe it shouldn't be, just because of the way Matt Rule thinks about roster development and recruiting players.
Did Nebraska need another running back, do you think, Connor?
I don't know. You'd like to think that your answer is in that room. I guess it doesn't seem obvious to me that that person is before Nelson. So I guess I'm on the surface. I'm not completely against the idea of adding another guy, but I don't know. Hopefully, theoretically, your answer was in that room before and probably still is, right? But so I guess my answer to that question would be no. I don't think they needed one.
I wonder about their confidence in the return to health of everyone and just how healthy that room is going to be. Gabe Ervin is coming off a major injury situation, and he's had previous major injury situations, and this one is a hip, and that's difficult to bounce back from as a running back. And he's the guy who I think had the farthest to go in the spring. So it raises the question of where he's at now as they get about a month away from the open of camp but by and large, Nebraska just continues to be this program that will take players when players present themselves. Whether it's a quarterback like we saw at the post-grad camp or a running back who goes way back with Barthel and just posted a good time or some good numbers and measurements at a far-flung camp that Nebraska wasn't even in attendance at. But that's why those verified numbers are so big, because if you run a 4.4 at an Under Armour camp in New Jersey, it's really no different than doing it on campus in Lincoln in June. And the Nebraska coaches want to see that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many like you could look at it this way. If you have options, then it makes it more possible that one of those guys is going to emerge. But like you said, it kind of gives you the sense that they just want to give themselves a little bit of a safety net, especially in that running back room. And then, Rules talked about it. They really like, he doesn't refer to them this way, but guys who are developed, but it's obvious with a guy like David Huffkin, like developmental projects, they really, really like to take chances on guys because of some athletic traits or what they do from a testing perspective, and really, really believe in themselves in development. They really, really believe in themselves.
Did you see the photos that Huffkin Huffkin posted from his visit to Nebraska?
Yeah, I did.
I mean, he's developmental. He's a newcomer to the program, but you're going to know when you see him that he's 22 and dude's been spending some time in the weight room. He doesn't look like someone who's going to need all that much time physically to just be ready to go. Now, learning the game is a different story, but he's a specimen. I'll say that. And I don't know if the book is closed. Not that anything I've heard from him or from Nebraska, but looking at him, I wonder if the book is entirely closed about him playing on the offensive side of the ball. Yeah. And could that guy help you coming off the edge right now? Yeah, I think he could. But Nebraska wants to do things that are in the best long-term interest of their players. And that, in their early determination, just scouting Huffkin in Texas at the camps, was for him to be an offensive tackle. We'll see. We'll see if that sticks through training camp.
I want to talk about the running back room a little bit more in the third segment of the show, but let's take our first break here, and we'll come back and recap a little bit of what we saw at the College World Series as it finished up last night. As Rocky Top is on top of the college baseball world, and Texas A&M falls short of a long-awaited national championship. So we'll get into that, but please subscribe and follow us on Twitter at LockedOnNEB, or you can email the show, lockedonneb@gmail.com. We'll be back after this. All right, it's Tapper here for the FanDuel Sportsbook. As the sports calendar begins to slow down, this is where you carve out your niche, ladies and gentlemen. There is still baseball. There is still baseball on every single night, with the exception of that week, I guess, during the All-Star game. So all you got to do is open up the FanDuel Sportsbook app and dream up bets anytime that you're in the mood. This summer, FanDuel is hooking all customers up with a boost or a bonus daily. It's easy. I did it yesterday, actually. You go to the app, and there's plenty of options for you. Just opt into the boost right at the top of it. There's something for everyone every single day, all summer long. So, as Mitch and I have talked about, we're Royals fans. Right now, looking at the Royals and the Marlins tonight on Tuesday, Bobby Witt Jr. is plus 400 to hit a home run. You could take that option, and there's plenty of boosts available for you. Exactly. Listen to the man. Take the option. It's on the FanDuel Sportsbook. All you have to do is head to FanDuel.com/lockedon and make the most out of your summer with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
Okay, we are back for segment number 2. Mitch Sherman here. Connor Happer is with me. The College World Series is over. Connor, we have been living down there. You've been living down there more than me over the entire series. I was back for the finals. Tennessee beat Texas A&M 6-5 on Monday night to win the national championship. It was very, very hot in downtown Omaha on Monday. Congrats to the Aggies and the Volunteers, of course, for once again upping that experience downtown. I thought the finals this year had just a great vibe because of the fans who supported both of those teams. Huge fan bases for Texas A&M and for Tennessee, and they definitely represented and it brought like a football type of environment, I thought, to the College World Series, which isn't always the case. LSU, like, it's so embedded in them baseball that it's like it's an LSU baseball environment, not an SEC football environment when the Tigers are playing as they were last year. So, but this was different. This was I don't know. I haven't experienced a finals exactly like this, just because of the unique nature of both of those fan bases. They really, really, really brought it, and I think it's it reflects well on college baseball, makes college baseball feel every bit as important as football season does. And that was also illustrated by the star power at that game last night. I was walking around on the infield after the celebration, and you just bump into Greg Sankey, of course, who's there every year, but Peyton Manning and Rick Barnes and Josh Heupel. And I didn't see Morgan Wallen. I don't know if he was down there. I don't care, but I guess the players were looking for him, and I know he was sitting in the stands with that crew.
Yeah, he was definitely. They had the shot on ESPN like probably 100 times all night. It's like, here's Peyton Manning and Morgan Wallen and Josh Heupel and Rick Barnes all hanging out together. Like, what a crew!
What were they talking about?
What a crew! I don't know. I don't know what Morgan Wallen was in Peyton Manning's ear about, but I'm interested to know the answer to that. I think you make a great point about just what the tension was like in there, and you add it with 99 degrees or whatever it was at first pitch, like being down in the field in the last kind of 2 innings of that game. It was it's Tennessee is a program that is that takes in the mirror image of their head coach. They are tightly wound, right? They are always kind of locked into these things, and in the past the pressure has kind of gotten to them, I think, a little bit. They had the pressure of being the number 1 seed this year, and so when they're hanging on to a 6-1 lead and it turns into a 6-3 lead and it turns into a 6-4 and 6-5 in the 9th inning, you're like, whoa, is everything okay? And you could just like feel it. There's a true pressure cooker environment at the Chuck box last night. So that was cool. I'm glad I didn't have to be the person who had to feel that pressure. Tony Vitello was certainly feeling it, and then he let it all out after he dove into the stands afterwards. He straight up stage dive last night, which I thought was a great move.
Are you also glad that you didn't have to be the person who asked Jim Schlossnagle, the Texas A&M coach, the question after the game about his interest in the Texas job? Hey, thank you, Texas, everyone. For anyone who's mad that this became a topic of conversation during the national championship game about whether one of these coaches, notably Jim Schlossnagle, the Texas A&M coach who has worked with Chris Del Conte, now the athletic director at Texas. They work together at TCU. For anyone who's mad about this becoming a topic of conversation, and that would include Jim Schlossnagle, who was mad about it when he got asked after the game. Blame Texas.
Yep. Always.
Why did Texas need to fire their coach on the day that the winner-take-all national championship game was occurring? If you don't think that Texas 100% did that on purpose,
yes,
to raise the pressure, to steal attention, to say, hey, here we are, SEC, we're coming, you are fooling yourself. That is Texas. That is what they do. That's what they have done before. And it made some people mad that the A&M coach had to address it because there was a question after the game, but it needed to be asked. And yeah,
I was
glad
reading
that you didn't have to ask that.
Absolutely. I mean, Texas, whenever there's some sort of like, there's a big job open, or we're talking about conference realignment, the Longhorn Network, all that stuff. Like Texas is always involved in all of these conversations, and it always makes things just way more confusing than just kind of lord over the college, sports environment. They're hot board for that job, Mitch. Like I was reading some of the National College Baseball reporters, like Kendall Rogers of D1 Baseball is super plugged into all that stuff. The hot board is insane. The first two names are the two coaches that coached in the national championship game last night, Schlossnagle and Tony Vitello. And then it's like any of the best other four coaches in the country. Right. And
Kevin O'Sullivan, Jay Johnson.
We're talking about like, I think I read that Tim Corbin is basically the highest paid coach in the country right now at in the neighborhood of like $2 million. What are we talking about here? Are we talking about like $3 to $4 million to upseat a coach who's having success and can win national championships just to go and chase, which is probably one of, if not the best college baseball job out there in Texas, and like it has all the history behind it? That is crazy. But it's classic Texas. It's amazingly Texas. I can't wait to see where it goes.
Remember when Nebraska had a 41-day coaching search? Steve Peterson, at one point in that coaching search, wanted to make a big splash on the day of the national championship game. I believe it was to hire Houston Nutt.
That's right.
Or something wild that was going on in the middle of that. That was in his mind. And in the story that Max Olson and I reported about that search, it came up. And one of the players in that situation told us that there was at one time a plan to do it on the day of the national championship, because that's the mentality of a certain type of ego that exists within college sports. And Texas is just like the living embodiment of it. So that's what you saw on display around college baseball yesterday. And it kind of made a little bit of a mess of the A&M post-game situation. I tend to think, listening to Schlossnagle's answer, I'm more inclined to believe that he's going to Texas after hearing him answer it that way, getting angry than I was going into the question being answered. So he might be going, and it could be for $3 or $4 million. And our friend Trev Alberts is going to be sitting there with empty hands, after just being on the cusp of bringing home the first national championship in a major men's sport to College Station since 1939. And then you get there on the doorstep and you lose your coach. Oh, by the way, to your hated rival, the enemy Longhorns. So if that happens, it's not going to be a fun moment for Trev.
We're mixing it up. And as it pertains to Nebraska, the Big Ten, by the way, on the outside looking in on all these conversations. So if you don't want to deal with the drama, then just don't be involved in the conversation. That's what the Big Ten has kind of decided to do.
Ohio State did just hire a baseball coach and went and rated Campbell, a good Group of 5 program. But this is Ohio State, the big dog in the Big Ten. Instead of like prowling through the SEC backyards or the ACC backyards for Texas, I'm shocked that Texas is not like trying to steal the Rangers manager or the Astros or something like that. Like, hey, come to Texas. But now Ohio State is doing the way that you might expect in a major conference to go the mid-major route. But not in the SEC. They're going to look in everyone else's house to see if there's a better one that they can just they can rip off.
Well, speaking of which, in Ohio State, they also lost their ace pitcher yesterday to Arkansas. Landed Beidle Chase. So,
Yeah.
that
The rich get richer, and I'm not even talking about like overall money in athletic departments. In this sport that we have, that crowns its champion in Omaha every year, it is all about that one league. And we're talking about this a lot in this Locked On Nebraska podcast. But like, if you're a Nebraska baseball fan, if you're a Nebraska football fan, like this stuff all impacts you because this is the new age of college sports. And the way that the SEC runs college football is the way that the SEC the way that the SEC runs college baseball is the way that the SEC wants to run college football. And I asked Greg Sankey about that last night, standing there on the warning track by the on deck circle in the first base dugout. And he's like, yeah, it all goes together. Like if you try to separate these sports and say you put this one over here and this one over here and football should be on its own plate, like you're going about this wrong, because look at this place. He said, look around you, look at these fans and everything that's going on here. Like we want this in all of our sports. So he makes tries to hide nothing about the fact that what you see going on in Omaha every June is exactly the way that commissioner is dreaming for it to be in college football.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, honestly, I agree with them. Like, they want to win everything everywhere all the time, and they're putting the money and the resources into it. And the company you keep is obviously really important. So it was cool to be around that for the last couple of weeks. And I think there are definitely some things that bleed into other parts of college athletics. But let's take a break here, Mitch, and we'll come back and get back into some of the nitty gritty here in Nebraska football. Talked about it at the beginning of the show, the running back room. What do we see there right now, and what might play out as we get closer and closer to the fall? But first, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all that shouting or JJ Redick cussing at you? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. A free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. That's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
All right, so let's do that big jumble of the running back room. The addition of Mekhi Nelson, you have Ramir Johnson, you have Gabe Ervin, you have Emmett Johnson, you have the transfer from Oregon, Dante Dowdell, you have the freshman, the redshirt freshman, and Quentin Ives, and you have a walk-on in Maurice Mazuka, who got some run this spring and some chatter about him this spring. Huge jumble, a bunch of different types of players, a bunch of different types of running backs and running back styles. I mean, outside of that, Mitch, like I kind of asked you before, what do you see with the room, and how do you think it'll play out, or do we have any good sense of that when we about 2 months away when the football season starts to kick off?
Yeah, it's going to be one of the biggest questions of camp. I'm already thinking about like how that's going to be addressed when Nebraska opens camp, and when we get an opportunity to watch a little bit of practice in early August. Who's going to be getting those reps with the ones? I would think if Gabe Ervin is healthy and fully ready to go, that he's the guy, because he's always been the guy when he's been healthy. That's been a constant in his career. Even when he was a true freshman, he quickly ascended to that position. But the problem has been that he's had a difficult time. He hasn't been able to stay healthy over more than like a month-long period in his career. So and if he's not fully back yet, then I think it's going to be Ramir Johnson and Emmett Johnson who are splitting reps. And, kind of what Nebraska has here in sorting out this situation is that they've got multiple positions kind of within the running back position. Ramir and Mazuka, and I think the new guy Nelson, they play more of a spot that allows them to kind of shift into like the slot or even out wide if needed. More of what you would look at as like a third down back. And then obviously Ives and Dowdell and Gabe Irvin are bigger guys. And Emmett Johnson, he's kind of the one who is maybe the guy who can give you a little bit of everything. So an edge there for Emmett, who brought it home at the end of the season last year.
Let me say this: like I don't love what they have, at that position. I prefer the room. Especially with the way that I think they want to play, I prefer the room to have a little bit more definition in terms of, who's going to have the ball in their hands. And we've talked about 1,000-yard rushers and stuff like that before. Like, it doesn't have to be exactly that. So not only do you have a big pot of guys who haven't really done it before, you also have injury concerns and then experience concerns on top of that. So like, I don't love how they've, necessarily built the room. Now, some of it is you are at the mercy of what you get. And I think they really liked a running back in the 2024 class that ended up going elsewhere in Kwan Lacey. And so you ended up having to add on the back end now with Nelson, and you're trying to kind of, just piece it together with guys doing different roles and in different things. To be clear, I think they'll still be able to run the ball fine, just because of the balance of their offense should be like 100 times better this year with quarterbacks and wide receivers and stuff like that. That'll help the run game, but it's just like I always think at that position you just need a little something extra than what a replacement level guy is kind of going to give you. And I don't know that I see a whole lot of above replacement level guys at the position right now. So I think that's kind of what I'm watching at that spot. Maybe I'm wrong. But I think it's a big kind of jumble right now.
It does feel like they're throwing darts at the wall a bit, I'd say. And, Barthel, the running backs coach, he might have the toughest job of any assistant coach going into camp, because any of those guys that we talked about could end up being someone, not just late in the season, but even early in the season, who carries a big load for you. Now, I don't know if it's going to be Maurice Mazuka. I think there's a spot for him in the rotation, in the mix of depth. I don't really see any scenario where like he's starting against Colorado, but any of the other guys, like what if Quentin Ives comes out and Mekhi Nelson, the new back too, he's going to need a little bit of time. But of the others, what if Quentin Ives comes out and all of a sudden has it figured out with everything he needs to do in pass protection? He might be the most physically gifted of the whole group. Or Dowdell, after a semester on campus, is the player that everyone thought that he was as a recruit, and the guy that Oregon signed, and he showed flashes of that in the spring game. Of course, the other three all have starting experience at Nebraska. So like, you could be going so many different directions, and EJ's got to figure that out. He's got to look at it and not have preconceived notions and find the best player, truly the best player, the one who performs at the level they need in August in order to have the confidence to go give them the ball and line up, next to the quarterback in the shotgun on August 30th.
Yeah. 31st. Well, I think it's going to be the best three, it's
right.
So that True. I think that's kind of the way that they're going to do it. I wouldn't be surprised if each of Nebraska's top, barring injury or whatever, and how you kind of plan it out for the year, it kind of feels like each of Nebraska's top 2 or 3 guys are going to have pretty similar amounts of carries, throughout the year. I think that's kind of how they want to play the spot. And maybe it's half how they want to play the spot and half a result of what you have. And, that part I'm fine with. But I'm interested to see how that position evolves going forward. And if they really are interested in finding a feature guy and letting that guy, run for 1,500 yards or not. So I'm curious to see where that goes after this year.
And then they've got Jamarian Parker coming in the 25 class, and I think he's the guy that this staff finally feels like they may have hit a home run with in recruiting. But he's a year away from coming in, part of that group. I'll finish with this: the weekend that was in Lincoln did include a bunch of official visitors, and we're kind of waiting on word. We got the word about Nelson, who's the 24 player, but they're really kind of just sitting on sitting on pins and needles as it gets closer to July. The dead period is now here in recruiting. No more official visits, no more until September, no more players on campus this summer. So you have, I think there's a short period in July, but for all intents and purposes, they're done with this portion of the summer. And you have Chase Lofton, the tight end from Millard South, who visited over the weekend. Jeremiah Jones was a big time athlete out of Kentucky who visited over the weekend. And if you believe like some of the emojis that were coming from people like Keith Williams, the director of player personnel, there's some things that happened in Lincoln this weekend that we've yet to hear about. So we will continue to wait and see where this thing shakes out by the 4th of July.
Yeah, I'm sure in 2 weeks, usually there's a whole kind of wave of commitments by the 4th of July weekend. So by the end of next week, I'm sure this will have a little bit of a different feel for it. Nebraska feel like their 25 class is coming together, but I think we're in that wait and see mode right now for sure.
Yeah, they've all got to get their edits done. So once that happens, then they can make the announcements. So
get your edit.
We're waiting.
Right.
We're waiting. Put the notifications on and just see what happens. So, all right, that's it for today. Make sure you join us again on Wednesday. We'll have some fun and interesting stuff to talk about. I already kind of have an idea of that. May or may not involve something that is related to Memorial Stadium. That's my only tease there. So, want to let you know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus national shows that cover every league. So find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app.